Alright guys, we're going to try to diagnose the FICM here in this 2004 F250. One of the easiest ways to get at it, it's right down here, so we're going to want to remove this hose right here. Get that. There we go. Didn't even really need to do the clamp. You can always open that, depressurize it. And then when we do the run test, this is going to want to spray liquid out on us. So what I like to do is take one of these clamps, it doesn't hurt the hose because it's got the soft, smooth sides, and just go ahead and give that a squeeze so that it doesn't shoot fluid out at us while we're doing our start test. And just to keep it out of the way, I might actually go ahead and give it a quick little fold over and a pinch. That way we can tuck it and keep it out of our way. Get the wrench out of here. The next step we're going to want to do is remove these bolts. These are 8mm. And then we're going to go ahead and slide this guy up and out so that we can get at the FICM there. One more hose on the bottom. Now that I've removed that, we can take and remove this hose. Enough room there to kind of pull that out. So now that we've got that removed to the side, what we're going to have to do is there's two T20 torque screws on the inspection plate up there. We can pull that plate off and that'll actually allow us to diagnose the voltage. Here's a close-up view on this plate and those two T20 torque screws, and you're going to want to be real careful taking that off because you're going to have four little electric probes sitting up there that if you cross anything you can end up doing some damage to the circuit board. So as you're taking it off, you want to make sure there's no metal contact happening between any of those. Now here's what it looks like with the cover off. There's the probes there, one of the notes. So when you're putting this back on, you want to make sure you get all that junk off both on the housing and on the cover so that you get a good seal so you're not getting any moisture in there with those electronic compounds. Alright. So we're going to want to set the multimeter up where you're able to measure 48 volts. So we're going to want to be set to the 200. And a good way to check is put your black on negative, check your battery. We should see the voltage measuring up there, 2.4. Now we're going to go over here to the FICM and we're going to measure the bottom. And the first one we're going to look at, that's just the FICM without the key on. We're going to go ahead and just turn the key on. And once we're going to see the cycle here, we should see that above 45. Wait for it a second. And there's the key on, 48 volts. Now we'll go ahead and try to crank it over. It won't start, but So as we saw when we tried to start it, it immediately went out of spec and dropped down, so that's a good indicator, checking the voltage, that the FICM's no good. Okay, so since we diagnosed that we weren't getting the correct voltage coming out, we're going to go ahead and take the FICM off. First thing was to remove the bracket. We had the nuts were 10 millimeter and the bolts were 8 millimeter. Had 2 up front on a bracket, 2 in the back, and what I like to do is just remove everything, put them in the same place where they were before, so when we go to reinstall it, we know where everything's at. Now, the next step underneath here, we have the wiring harness. So there's 3 different ones that we're going to have to get in there and pinch each side and then pull them off. And a little hard to get on the camera angle. As soon as I get that off, I'll show everybody the underside. Alright, so we kind of slid her where I could get to the bottom and then snapped them off. You have to pinch them on either side. Usually once you get that first one to come off, gives you a little bit more room. A couple of little tips taking these off. Sometimes if you're putting pressure trying to pull down on it, they can be really hard to disengage. So if you push them back up towards the FICM, you can actually get them to clip off and then come down a little bit easier. So got the last one off there. Now check this out of place. That's kind of what the clips look like in the bottom there. So now we have the unit off, and we'll take this inside and work on that to get the new power supply put in. Alright, now that we're back inside, we've got a little bit of a cleaner workbench to go with. Hands are pretty dirty, so we're going to go ahead, since we're dealing with electronics, make sure we get some gloves on. Try to keep everything inside here as clean as possible. First thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and take this terminal cover off. As you can see, tums are an essential part of the workbench. Whenever you're doing a project like this, it tends to spike the heartburn acid levels. Now we have the 3 terminals in here. We're going to want to remove that a little bit smaller. The outside's a T20. Let's see what the inside is here. Gloves help keep everything nice and clean, but they certainly don't make handling anything. So that right there is the T10 for the inside terminals. Again, I try to keep everything in order, so when you're putting it back together, you know exactly where it came from. I even like to put the same terminals in the same place. It's got the same thread pattern, just makes everything a lot easier when you're putting stuff back together to just do the reverse process of what you took apart. I hate projects where you try to fix something and somebody else has already taken it apart. Makes it a lot more difficult than when you can take it apart and literally just reverse your process. It's the easiest way to get things back together. have all those terminals removed, we are going to go ahead and flip her over. And now we've got the screws on the outside of the casing. We're going to go ahead and take those all apart. For these, we're back to that 220. Go ahead and put the extension on so that fingers don't get in the way. And the same thing, like to keep these. Put them in the exact same holes they came out of. Makes life much more simple, a little easier during these difficult projects. Could be using my little speed ratchet thing on this, but I'm always nervous too, working with an aluminum case and with these threads. It's a little easier. Kind of feel the torque by hand. Take it easy, make sure nothing's going to strip on us. Right now, that new power supply board is about $180 out the door. If we were to buy this whole replacement unit, it'd be about $400. I think if we used the discount code and everything, we found one for $300 if we waited for shipping. And either way, it cuts the project price in half. So what we don't want to do is mess this housing up or the logic board. That kind of defeats the whole purpose. Makes us do a lot more work. Alright, there we go with the last bolt. So we celebrate, eat a couple of Tums, take the heartburn down a little bit. Now what we're going to need to do here is get these plates to separate. So what you're looking to do is get something small enough to fit in there, but large enough to pry it open. There we go. Spin a little bit, then those things can kind of be a pain. If you look here, this is the logic board. So there's the parts of those three terminals that we're looking at. Get it up here, the lighting's a little bit better for you. So we're going to go ahead and set that aside. There you go. Put that over here. What we're looking to do is to remove these parts here. So there's a couple of T20s. We're going to go ahead, take those out, and then we'll get these caps off. Okay, so now we have the capacitor covers off, and since we've taken care of that, we're gonna go ahead and now we've got some screws in here to go ahead, and as you can see, they poured some resin in there, and like right here, this guy's just completely covered. We're gonna have to go ahead and take a pick, remove that, and make sure that we can get our hex head in there. The other ones, that one, yeah, we got 3 of them that we're going to have to go ahead and remove that resin. Alright, so we scraped off the resin enough where we could get a good lock on that torque head. is even. If you get the resin off, it can try to hold those screws in place. We'll go ahead and see if we can get that one to jump out. Alright, the next one we've got right in the middle there. A little bit of a tight fit for our head, but we're able to make it work. Trying to hold it up, so we'll give it another bit of a shake. We still have 1, 2, 3, 4 more to go. This is the easiest one. Save him for the halfway point because you need a little moral victories. Again, trying to keep them in the same pattern that they came out with, so we can put them in. That is tight. One more in the corner should do the trick for us. Make sure we get that correctly. I think we're probably stuck in the resin on that one. Got her out. Just try to gently remove her. Get back in the shot here. That's what the power supply unit looks like. Now, there's some heat tape here. So what we're going to want to do, they take some supplied heat tape. We're going to want to go ahead and swap those out. We have our new unit here. Again, we got our gloves on to make sure we're treating it as gently as possible. Let's go ahead and get this heat tape swapped off. Little sticky here. This guy's actually didn't look too bad, but we're gonna go ahead and put the new one in. Make sure you line up where you can get your hole in. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing on this side. Keep that as clean as we can. Go ahead and line it back up. Make sure all of our torque screws are in the right spot. What I like to do is just kind of go around, get them placed, just start them, get them snug. Leave them a little loose in case you gotta move the board around a little bit, and make sure everything lines up. And we've just got a couple more here. Go around, get them all at least hand tight. Now that we've got them all in place. Again, it's a circuit board and we want to be as gentle as possible, so you're really not looking to crank down on this thing and snap it off, because that'll defeat the whole purpose of what we're trying to accomplish here, which is getting the truck back up and running for the least financial burden. Just snug them. That's all we're looking to do. Just get them snug. Nowhere near anything to break the board. Okay. Got the new power supply in. Now, just got to keep following the reverse process. Go ahead and put our capacitor covers back in place. Alright, so we got these hand tightened. Again, we're going to go in here and just snug them down. Alright, now we're just going to keep working backwards. So we have these terminals on the logic board. I'm going to go ahead and feed those through here. Got some slots that help you line up, make sure you're in the right spot. And again, we'll use the bolts from the same order we took them out in. Get a couple started in here so we know I have the right place. That's why I like doing them by hand. That one was trying to cross thread on me, and you're able to kind of get it to go back into place. Before I put this on, I checked to make sure that the seal that was around this was nice and clean so that you get a good seal, keep the moisture out. So we have those all in place. We're going to go ahead and just work them in. Don't even start to snug them yet. We just want to make sure that we're getting a good seal. This way we're ensuring that all of them are able to go into place and the cover's in the correct position. in the right spot. Now we can go ahead and grab the ratchet. And we want a good seal to make sure we're not getting any moisture in there, but with this being aluminum and how much power you can get behind the ratchet, just make sure you're snugging it down and you got a good seal on it. Once you got them snug, always make sure you go back, check the first couple you did, make sure everything looking good. Now our next one is we're going to go ahead and replace those terminals in there. So we want to make sure, just to make our lives easier, we're going to put them in by hand. For this one, we got to go back to the smaller, back to our T10. Now we're going to go ahead and put that terminal in. Just snug them. Get you a little better view of what's going on there. Again, we're going onto a circuit board. Crank this thing down, you're going to snap that circuit board and you'll have to redo everything we just did. So, slow and easy. Get them snug. Do not snap that board. Nice and snug, does the trick. Go back to the first one. We're going to be putting the terminal cover back on. Just make sure we check that that's good. There's nothing there, so that we'll get a nice good seal. Make sure our cover's on. We've just gone back to our T20. Go ahead and get that one started. Make sure that's lined up in the center. Get this one started. Snug them up there. Come over this side. Snug them up. There we go. There we go. Nothing too much. All back together. New power supply. Doctor. All good. So now back out to the truck. Go ahead and reverse order of how we took it out. Okay, now this is one of the most important tips when you're reinstalling, is you really got to make sure that those clips go back into place and that they snap. So the best thing you can do is when you snap them in, try to pull them out, make sure they're not in there just loosely, and that they'll come out over time. So when you snap them in, give them all a really good tug and make sure that they're actually in the correct place. Alright, so we got all three of them snapped back in there. I gave all three of them a really good tug to also make sure that they're in place. The next step is going to be placing this back on, putting the brackets back into place, front and back, and then mounting the bolts. Just finishing snugging up the 10mm bolts on the front side. My suggestion for this is the 8mm that are on the back side are a little bit tricky. There's not a lot of room back there, but if you get that bracket in, it'll actually help feed the bolts down into place and kind of get those started by hand while everything's a little loose before you tighten everything up front. Make sure they're in the right spot, so that all you have to do is finish tightening those, hand snug these, then come up, finish this front part, and then the FICM is back installed. Alright, now for putting the diagnose unit back on, you see there's a little bit of a lip there that'll go down into the bracket there. We'll snap it back into place. Remember to hook our hose back up on both the left and the right sides. Once we get that hooked up, we'll go ahead and try to fire it up and see what it looks like. Alright, we remembered to put the hose back on this side. Got the hose on the bottom part reconnected. Made sure that when we slid this back in, it goes underneath so that you're able to get these 8mm bolts back in. Got those re-snugged. Now it's just time to try to fire it up.